Previously on X-Men. The X-Men discovered that Genosha was turning mutants into slaves. Xavier had business to attend to in Scotland, and the X-Men encountered the mysterious mutant fugitive known only as Cable. What happens next? Find out now on an all-new episode of the Uncanny X-Cast. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Uncanny X-Cast. I'm your host and leader of the blue team, Wes Vereen. And this is my co-host and leader of the gold team, Jason. Hey buddy, how are you doing?
Oh man, what's up, Wes? What is going on? Shoot, not a whole lot here. Just finished watching the newest Game of Thrones. It's okay, but I'm just being honest.
Fair enough. Shots fired.
But I cannot wait to talk about this episode, dude. I dug this episode for some, like, I don't know why, but we'll talk about it, but I really, really like this episode.
Yeah, we are going to talk about it. There's a lot going on in this episode. It's a jam-packed, like, it's like it's Slave Island Part 2. Like, there was so much in Slave Island, and then we kind of, I don't want to say a filler episode, but a nice relief in the Unstoppable Juggernaut, and then we're right back into the thick of things with this episode. Man, yeah, well, there's a lot to address, but first, your overall thoughts, like you said, you dug it. You really liked it. I did,
yeah. I really, really liked it. It's bringing in some new characters, some characters I know, again, from the movies only. Angel, that was a pretty cool reveal. Some of the, you mentioned Pyro. If it's the same Pyro I know from the X2 films, I didn't think he was a bad guy. Is he an actual bad guy, or is he just like a mercenary thing? Don't know who Avalanche is. We see Mystique for the first time, so that's kind of cool. Oh, yeah. I think pretty much we see Mystique for the first time in this episode that I'm aware of.
Yeah. So Pyro, Avalanche, and Mystique all had cameos on Slave Island, but this time they actually
They did. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm remembering that now. But yeah, man, this is overall fantastic. You know, we're getting towards the end of the season. I think after this we have 3 episodes left. So
4.
Is it 9, 10, 11, 12? Oh, yeah. Okay, 4 episodes left. Excuse me. So, yeah, they're ramping up stuff. Like, storylines, I think, are getting crossed now. It's just, I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah. Things are all the storylines are coming together and culminating. And it's great because even though I've enjoyed every episode for the most part so far, the cohesion between all the episodes is really, like, they're starting to hit their stride.
Yeah, no joke. They really are.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get right into it. We got a lot to cover. The episode begins with a blonde handsome man and his snow bunny sitting by a campfire. And this blonde gentleman turns out to be Warren Worthington III, a.k.a. Angel. And real quick, Angel was an original member of the X-Men. He was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. His first appearance was in the very first X-Men episode, and that debuted in September 1963. So even though he hasn't been part of the animated show, he is an OG as OGs can be in the X-Men universe. Yeah.
Cool.
And bit of trivia, he was the first Marvel character with wings.
Really?
Yeah. If you'll remember, Superman can fly without any motivation. He can just lift.
Yeah.
Stanley took issue with that. He was like, I want to have a justification for why a character can fly. So apparently nobody in Marvel had wings either. So this was the first winged Marvel character.
Yeah.
And Angel is voiced by Canadian actor Stephen Ouimet. I hope I'm saying that as Canadianly as I can possibly say it. And Stephen Ouimet also voiced Beetlejuice in the animated series, the Beetlejuice animated series.
No way, really? I love that cartoon growing up.
I just watched the intro for that yesterday, and I got all the nostalgia feels. But I think Stephen Ouimet does a great job. He kills it because he gives Warren, without trying to do too much vocally, he gives Warren a little bit of like underlying anger and arrogance in his voice. Like he just seems like a guy who's real uptight.
Yeah,
and I think that's great for Warren Worthington III.
Yeah.
I mean, with a name like that, he's going to be pretentious.
A little bit.
Yeah. And storyboard wise, I like it because they had a lot to cover in this episode. So you see him, you hear the tone of the voice, and then they had this close up shot of Angel's eyes with the fire reflecting in them.
Mm-hmm.
And I just figured, in terms of storyboarding an episode, you've given us a lot of information about this character visually in a very short amount of time. So I thought they did a great job with that. You get an immediate sense of the character, and but turns out they're not alone in their chalet in the snowy mountains. His snow bunny is asking him about a scientist named Dr. Adler,
Mm-hmm.
who, we're going to do some editing magic here. Remember in a previous episode where I told you to put a pin in it when Slave Island, we were talking about a genius in Scotland?
Yes.
I'm going to cut to that right now.
Like, she can manipulate weather and stuff. Is it mind? Is it a physical thing? Because with collars, I feel like that's something physical that you'd have to suppress, but that I don't like. How does that Gambit's powers? Okay, that kind of makes a little bit of sense because he can, but it's still, there's matter. He's moving. He's not. You can't stop matter, or I assume everyone will die or something bad will happen. But yeah, I don't understand how those collars necessarily work.
And we're back. Now's the payoff for that. All right. She's asking him about this scientist, and Warren says that he sent Dr. Adler away, but they're staying in his chalet.
Mm-hmm.
And the fugitive, known only as Cable, the mysterious mutant, appears, breaks in, and starts going through the stuff. Angel goes downstairs and encounters Cable when Cable is hiding behind a bookshelf and reaches through it to grab Angel.
Yeah.
Tell me what you thought of this encounter.
Dude, this, like, not only just this encounter, this entire opening had such a different feel to what every other episode that has opened with for this show so far. I don't know what it was, but this felt a little bit more mature. Like, I can't put a pin on it why I feel like that, but it's...
No, you nailed it. I agree.
Like, it had such a cool, like... I hate to say vibe. I've been saying like a lot right now, but I hate to say vibe. But it had such a... I didn't write it down in my notes, but I got a very retro vibe from this opening. Like the synth that they were using for, when Cable shows up, it felt very, very not a children's cartoon at that time. And then just having Cable just go, girl, and, Warren, where's Godfrey Adler or Dr. Adler? And then it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then that whole fight, and then Cable getting his gun, swat away, pushing Angel into the snow and just having that kind of crumple on him, thinking, oh, okay, he's fine. I'm going to go back to doing what I need to do. It just felt different for some reason. Like, I really, really liked how this is almost like it was a cold open. I think is the best way I can describe it.
I think I agree with you in the terms of maturity, and I couldn't have put a pin on it either. But while you were talking, I was thinking what did set this apart, and I think that they're getting very nuanced with the storytelling.
I think so too.
I think they're starting to trust the kids that they're telling the story to a little bit more, and they're not having to feed them so much information. That you're starting to get things, like I said, with the storyboard, the fire in the eyes, things that are hinted at. The music is always great, and Cable. The music, like you addressed, is very reminiscent of like 80s action movies, kind of. And there's they play with timing. So Cable's downstairs, he's broken in, and you see Angel is about to open the door, and Cable's aware of that. So normally in the timing, Angel would open the door and there'd be an immediate confrontation. But Angel opens the door and Cable's a step ahead of him. He's hidden. Oh, and Cable does that twice in this opening sequence with the chalet, but then later on, he's still ahead of the characters a little bit, and I love it. I feel like they've nailed every aspect that they could possibly do. But
it's such a good way. It's so good.
They handled Angel well in a great way as well, because Cable grabs him through the bookshelf, and instead of Angel just being this whimpering twerp who's like, oh, who? He pulls a gun out and he shoots. He fires. Cable disappears again. And I like how he tells him, Warren says, he's like, oh, are you Dr. Adler? And he goes, no, I'm Warren Worthington, the third. As if like there could be some confusion, it's like, oh, you're the third Warren Worthington. Got it. Well, I wasn't looking for the first or second, so thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah.
an Angel says this cool line, or Cable says a cool line to him about next time you shoot somebody, make sure you don't miss. And Warren says, I'll remember that. And then they do like this quick draw where he blasts
Mm-hmm.
him, Cable dodges it and fires back and hits Warren and knocks him off the ledge. And I thought the timing of the animation, I'm trying to do little notifications like this for John, because I know he'd appreciate it. But the timing in the animation was just so quick and on the money.
It was so good, dude. Like,
Yeah.
you just talking about it is just making me remember this scene. I was like, wow, it really, drew me into the story immediately.
Yeah. And after they have that interchange, Cable even has that great dialogue because says, make sure you don't miss. Angel says he'll remember that. He shoots him off the balcony. And normally they wouldn't address it. We'd be laughing about how Angel just said he'd remember that and then immediately forgets it. And Cable, as he walks up to the balcony, goes, "You've got a short memory." And I was just like, oh, yes, dude. He shoots him and then insults him. Like this
He's a
Cable is
badass.
just full steam ahead. He's a total
Yeah.
badass. And and then you hear the Snow Bunny call for Warren, and Cable is ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
She opens the door. He's hiding behind the door, and they play with the timing again because you think she's going to open it, see this mercenary standing there. She's going to be frightened, but Cable's there, and love Warren's line, "Pal, you've picked the wrong chalet to terrorize." Like, tell me you're not a rich, pompous,
Very snobbish thing to
yeah,
say.
dude, without directly telling me that.
Yeah.
A chalet. And one thing I like in terms of the maturity, like we're addressing, is that this character, like you said, in terms of cold opening, the Snow Bunny doesn't even get a name. She's not even important, and you don't need to bring her on for the rest of the show. So it was great because Warren flies up. She's blinded by the flashbang that Cable threw.
Mm-hmm.
She shoots Warren, realizes the error, and doesn't even have a time to address it because Warren just flies off.
Yeah.
And there's that like heartbreak, and then you just move right on. It was great.
It was really good.
Yeah.
I really dug it.
Yeah, and the music as Warren was flying off really accented give you the emotional
Mm-hmm.
underlying of the scene. And then we are taken to Moira Mctaggart, and she is taking Xavier to meet with the aforementioned Dr. Adler. Now, Moira Mctaggart, we got to dive in. We got to talk about her. Tell me what you remember about Moira Mctaggart?
So going off of what I know of, is this Rose Byrne's character from First Class? Is that it? Okay.
Yes. However, in First Class and X-Men Apocalypse,
Mm-hmm.
they turned her into a CIA agent. She's not a CIA agent in the comics.
Oh.
She's Scottish. She couldn't possibly be a CIA agent.
Uh-huh.
But she's actually a geneticist. She's a very important character in the comic books, and I'll tell you a little bit about her. She first appeared in the Uncanny X-Men number 96 that came out in December 1917.
Mm-hmm.
She was created by Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum.
Of course.
She appeared, like we addressed, she did appear in X-Men. Oh, she also appeared in X-Men The Last Stand. In the third movie of the original trilogy. She appears in that, and then she made movie appearances in First Class and Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
And aside from being a love interest for Professor Xavier, she's actually a major supporting character. So even though she appeared in 1975, her history with the X-Men goes farther back than that. Because she was actually a silent partner in the founding of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters.
Really?
And she was the co-creator of Cerebro.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so even though she debuts in 1975, her presence has been felt throughout the entire X-Men run.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, while I was watching the show, I love Cable, and I want him to be in as many episodes as possible. But I thought his appearing in Scotland was a little clunky. I was like, it's where the story takes him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they need him to be. Not true. And this is what's beautiful about the writing. Cable, when he first appears from the future, actually washes up in Scotland. And Moira Mctaggart is the first person in this timeline that he meets.
Really?
And he uses his telepathy to read her mind and learn how to speak English. I don't know what language he was speaking before that, but yes. And they become friends and have stayed friends in the comics.
Oh, cool.
So Cable in the last episode is trying to track down who's invented these collars that have turned mutants into slaves. So in the story in the comics, leads him to Scotland, but also there's a direct tie-in with the comics.
That's
So
cool.
they're firing on all cylinders. And Moira Mctaggart is voiced by Lolly Cadeau, hope I'm saying that correctly, who was in an episode in a 1989 episode of The Twilight Zone.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and there's a tie into The Twilight Zone later on in this episode. That's why I want to put a pin in that. So Moira and Xavier are at the door of Adler, who tells him to kick rocks. Xavier decides to be intrusive and try to read Adler's mind. And how does that go for him, Jason?
Yeah, this is something I wrote down. Like, there's just a bunch of random images of, like, I guess other mutants, and I could be wrong. Again, I was watching this while I was writing notes last night, so I might have missed something while I was taking down these specific notes. But like, wasn't there? It was kind of not oppressive, but like very jarring, in your face, kind of flashing images. If I remember it correctly, and I don't know what any of that really means, or like who those flashes of people were, but it kind of screwed up Professor Avery, and like he kind of zapped out of that really quick.
Yeah, he starts convulsing, which causes Moira to take him to a bed, lay him down, and put a sponge on his head. Then they start talking about whether or not Adler could be a mutant based on what Xavier saw in Adler's mind. And Moira makes the grave mistake of saying a cure for mutants, which makes Xavier upset, and he proceeds to scold her and gives her a lesson on how being a mutant is just like anything else that you're born with.
Yeah.
Back at the X Mansion, which now looks less repaired than it did in the previous episode.
They're like, we're going too fast. Take some drywall down. We gotta save room for next week. Come on, y'all.
Yeah, well, a little inside baseball here. The way we saw these episodes, Unstoppable Juggernaut before The Cure, actually didn't happen when they originally aired. The Unstoppable Juggernaut wasn't done, so they had to air The Cure first. So I think that's why they weren't able to communicate between the two episodes how much of the X Mansion is done. But what I like to think is that since they built it in an afternoon in the last episode, those rushed repairs collapsed, so they had to start over again.
That's canon from here on out. We'll make that uncanny canon.
Yeah, that's what I like. And the X-Men seem to have completely forgotten about how well they bonded in the last episode.
I wrote a note about Wolverine, dude. What are you doing? Like,
he's being bossy, but what I kind of like is that I feel like he's being bossy, but he's trying to be a team player.
Yeah,
because at least he's being involved. He's walking around because Wolverine's got this very like upbeat kind of attitude the whole episode. Like, and he says something rude to Gambit, but also Gambit wasn't in the last episode. So maybe there's some resentment between like, hey, we all had to fight the Juggernaut and you weren't there. He offers Jean, hey, do you need me to nail something, Jean? Which could be a double entendre there. And Jean's like, no, thanks. I'm going to use my powers, and totally shows him up, which was cool. Jean it a little curbs him, but in a very charming way, I thought. Then he tells Storm she needs some more water in her mixture. So he's trying to be a team player. I think he's invested in what's going on because at least it shows that he's involved in repairing the X-Mansion.
He's trying
because in the last episode he mentions that he didn't realize how much the place meant to him until he saw it destroyed. So he's at least showing how much he cares. And somebody like Gambit, who chooses to sit out every other adventure, kind of rubs him the wrong way. But they start getting into it, and I love how Cyclops is ready for the BS. Because he just calmly turns around, faces them, doesn't even scold them, is just waiting for the moment when Gambit ignites a brick that Wolverine unknowingly starts setting aside, and Cyclops just taps it away from Wolverine into safety.
I feel like that'd be cool. Maybe not for Wolverine, but I feel like an exploding cinder block is kind of dangerous, even if you are just doing it to someone who can't, die very easily. Like, ooh, that's still a bomb you're going to blow up in his face, Gambit. Come on now.
Yeah, yeah. Gambit doesn't care.
No, he does not.
Yeah, he's willing to risk it. This causes the X-Men to get into it. Rogue intervenes and puts she puts a like a I don't know the architecture term, but like a dome over Gambit, which still
Mm-hmm.
has
Bars
pillars. So
or like
Gambit can still
gaps.
throw the card. Yeah, he could still have thrown the card, but I think because he crushes on Rogue, he doesn't throw it.
Mm-hmm.
They all, and then Wolverine tells Rogue that she has a soft spot for this Cajun, and the way
Yeah.
he says that line,
Yeah, that was like Wolverine.
I
You,
didn't know
sir.
Cajun. Yeah, I didn't know Cajun could be a slur until Wolverine said it this episode because I was like, "Oh, he said a hard C."
Wolverine, sir. You take that back. He is your friend.
Yeah,
Yeah, I noticed that. I was
yeah,
like, kind of like, of course, we might be taking it away that it wasn't meant back when it was in the 90s, but like, it felt very, you're Cajun and you have, or something like,
yeah,
it felt very weird.
yeah. No, it's not. It's not a slur, but the way he says it with so much hatred in his voice that
Yeah.
it's like, "Ooh, don't call people that."
Yeah, it was very
But
interesting.
yeah, totally. I'm glad you picked up on that too. And then, thank goodness, Jubilee shows up to break the tension and lets them know that someone wants to talk to them. This someone is Xavier, who finally decides to communicate clearly after several episodes of being MIA. He lets them know, that he's in Scotland. And again, while he's talking, there's a thing I love, which we talked about in the last episode. They rack focus. Because as the X-Men start discussing who would want to get rid of their powers, because
Hmm.
Xavier lets them know there's somebody working on something, the ability to reverse the mutation, as he words it. You see Rogue turn around. They say, who would want this power? Who would want
Yeah,
to reverse their powers? And Rogue, who, due to her powers, can't come in physical
physically.
contact
Yeah.
with any other living being, lives a very lonely life, turns and sees Cyclops and Jean Grey holding hands. And again, you have the rack focus.
I did
You
catch this one.
see,
I did catch
yeah,
this one.
okay,
Yeah, I
yeah.
did.
You see the hands, and then you see her reaction to it, and I love it. They're getting cinematic with the way they do things.
They really were with this, and that that just
Um,
shows like what Rogue is feeling or what she can't feel in that one shot. Like you instantly know why she turned and what she's thinking just from that itself. It was so good.
100%, and without like you don't like doing having to do an exposition dump.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think to go back to what you said in the beginning of the episode, it goes back to that maturity.
Hmm.
They're starting to tell the story with more tools other than just dialogue.
Yeah.
And doing advanced things like, again, I said it's 2D animation, but they're racking focus. How do they do that? Because you're drawing it all on the same page, I would
Hmm.
think. So there's layers to it, to the storytelling and the animation. And Wolverine says, there's no deserters in this crowd. And I wrote in my notes, says the deserter.
I didn't write that down. I caught that, but I was like, yeah, you've bounced like a few different times for incredibly petty reasons, Wolverine. You are the
He's
last one to be
deserted the
saying
team
anything.
at least twice. Once after Morph died, and then the other time to go to Canada.
Yeah.
So the pot calling the kettle black for sure
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And I love how oblivious he says it. Like, no deserters in this crowd. I think he even has like his hands behind his head. Talk about unaware. Then we see I'm sorry, not Wolverine, Cyclops and Jean Grey cuddling in a very uncomfortable construction site. But I guess
In their
lack of
costumes,
options right
no
now.
less. Like I was like, that was kind of a
I
weird
noticed
thing.
that too.
I was like, why are they
Yeah,
in their
I know.
costumes still?
Yeah. And Jean expresses concern about Rogue to Cyclops. And she admits that she knows it bothers Rogue when she touches Cyclops. But she still does it anyway.
Hmm.
Like, in that meeting with Rogue in the room, she still decides to hold Cyclops' hand while they're
Yeah.
having a business meeting, And Jean, I decided, doesn't care about breaking the hearts of her teammates because she knows it also bothers Wolverine. And they're just doing PDA while at team meetings. Rogue's hurting, Wolverine's hurting. I don't care. It's not the right time or place, but let's do it anyway. And then Rogue decides to get in a convertible and starts driving away. And I wonder, is she going to drive to Scotland? Like, what was her plan here?
Just,
I
getting
don't
some
know.
fresh air, that's all. I've taken trips where, I just needed to walk. I just needed to get out of the house for a little bit and just walk around. So I
Yeah,
understand that, but yeah, it was like, you can't drive to Scotland. You're in New York, first off.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
I don't even know where you would go. Is there even a land bridge? I guess maybe Canada, maybe trying to go Canada up and down back. Who knows? But yeah, it's
Yeah,
not going to
maybe.
happen, Rogue.
I mean, maybe in the Fast and the Furious franchise, they could like jump the car off of a slope in Canada, bounce off of Iceland and Greenland, and then land in Scotland.
That makes
Because that's
sense.
how their cars are just incredible in Fast and the Furious. But in this world, Rogue, who can fly, decides to first drive, then walk, and finally fly to Scotland.
Hmm.
She's inconvenienced by the Cajun horn dog Gambit,
Yeah.
who decides to go with her. She, I think, throws him out of the car, and then he proves that Gambit on foot is faster than a sports car because she peels off.
She
He runs
does.
on
She
foot,
does.
clears a wall, and lands back in the car. And instead of throwing him out or flying at that point, she decides to start walking away from him, which
Mm.
I don't understand. But Rogue flies off and decides, after a time, she gets tired. And she's sitting on the plane, the wing of an airplane. Now, are you familiar with the Twilight Zone?
I am. I caught this reference as well. I was like, oh, I see where this is going. But it's all from the point of view of Rogue, where you can't hear any of the dialogue this passenger and the flight attendant are
Yeah.
having. It was really good.
But I mean, if you could hear it, he's probably saying something like, "There's something out there, something on the wing. There's something there." Uh, but when he gets the stewardess's attention, she looks. There's nobody there, and she laughs at him, which
Hmm.
I thought was just a great. It's a great little
It's a
character
visual
detail.
gag too. Like it's so good.
Yeah, because Rogue is going through some emotional turmoil,
Yeah.
and we know that already. So to kind of give some levity to the situation, you have this visual gag, like you said, on the airplane. So again, great writing, great storytelling, great pacing.
Hmm.
And Rogue decides to confirm that it's Muir Island, not with a map, not with some tech
A
from
picture
the
of the
X-Men,
island itself.
but with a gigantic book that she hides in her belt. I don't know.
Very weird choice, I will say.
Yeah. And so she's made it to her destination. Then we cut to Pyro and Avalanche are playing darts and trashing Muir Island because there's nothing to steal, which is
Hmm.
shocking. Because there's a whole scientific, center,
Yeah.
the Muir Island Center for Research. So you figure there's some expensive science equipment there, but they're
Uh,
not trying hard
Not
enough.
these two goons.
Yeah, it perfectly describes them, and I love goons like this in stories that are because they're two goons in a story that they're in way over their head.
Yeah.
But I like them, because they kind of connect some dots for the other characters.
Hmm.
Pyro and Avalanche are both created by Claremont and Byrne, Chris Claremont and John Byrne. They both first appeared in the same episode, and that was Uncanny X-Men 141 that came out in January 1981.
Oh.
Pyro is voiced by Graham Haley, and Avalanche is voiced by Rod Ponybear. Now, they're both, as I mentioned before, we previously saw them in Slave Island. They were some of the colored mutants after everyone got freed up.
Hmm.
They decided to go to Muir Island, of all places. They went from one island to another, so maybe they're just island hoppers.
Yeah.
And Avalanche does allude to this by saying, if I don't find something to do, I'm just going to go to jail so that I'll have something to do.
Hmm.
I'm going to go back to jail, which, he kind of references the Genosha, the Slave Island thing.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Nice little bit of continuity.
Hmm.
Rogue walks in. They're talking about meeting their partner, Mystique. They don't know what she looks like because she's a shapeshifter. Rogue walks in. They think, hey, maybe this is Mystique. And Pyro must like the way Rogue looks because he decides to flirt with her. But he has a weird way of flirting. Jason, can you tell us a little bit about that?
It is just, oh God. Again, I was taking notes during this. I think he came on super strong, and he's like, "Hey, you're this so and so, right?" He's like, "Oh no, you have to be because uh, you're." I don't really know like what Pyro was doing. I enjoyed them as characters, but god dang, they were so annoying.
He decides to impress her by starting a fire. He literally sets fire to like a table and chairs, and there's smoke. There's black smoke 3 feet away from them, and it's like, how do you? What did you thought the next course of action wasn't that she was going to run out of the building for fear of her life?
And
That she was going to stand there and be like,
you're starting a
that's
fire in
very
a
attractive.
bar where there's a whole bunch of alcoholic beverages that are flammable. I mean, come on now.
That's a very good point, and you get points for that, sir. Uh,
Safety.
well, surprise to everyone involved, Rogue is not impressed with Pyro's weird way of flirting. She
Yeah.
decides to throw him and his friend Avalanche through walls.
I like this. This is good.
Yeah, Avalanche takes a plunge into the Scottish waters, and he reemerges from the water, concerned for his friend who was dangling from the hole in the wall. You know, because he's down in the water, right, where the waves are crashing up against the walls. I don't know if you've ever swam in water like that, but it's very dangerous. It's you almost don't have any control of yourself.
Yeah.
And the water will throw you into those rocks. So you could get knocked unconscious, you could break something, you could die, get pulled under by the current. Very easy to die. But Avalanche doesn't worry about his own life. He reemerges and screams for Pyro and realizes that Pyro's disappeared. We'll come back to this. Rogue is approaching Dr. Adler's shop and gets the same response that Moira and Charles Xavier did. Dr. Adler doesn't have time for them, but Rogue doesn't have time for this kind of behavior, so she rips the door off and decides to enter. She needs that
forceful
cure
entry.
ASAP.
Yep.
Yes. Breaking and entering. It's in Scotland, so she doesn't care. And we see Dr. Adler looks like Einstein, which I thought was a nice little tidbit. I don't know. Maybe you saw a similarity too. But as they're talking, Pyro has abandoned his friend.
He does, doesn't he?
Who could be drowning, and decides to go creep on Rogue. Right? Dr. Adler tells her that if she really wants a cure, come back in an hour so they can get everything ready. After Dr. Adler closed the door, we see a looming figure. And Jason, this is the first time you've seen this character looking like this. I want to know your thoughts, man.
We see the character version of Oscar Isaac. We see Big Man himself. We see Apocalypse. And boy, oh boy, he is not the Apocalypse I know from the movies. He looks completely different. I know we won't touch on it too much, but one, he's super dope looking. I love this like weird kind of like line thing he has going on his face. He is imposing looking, and there's like gravitas to him just from what we have seen of him so far. And
yes, and just to clarify, your only exposure to Apocalypse
is
thus
Oscar
far
Isaac. Is Age of Apocalypse. Yes, I had no idea that this is not what he was supposed to look like. I had no idea he was going to be in this episode. But when he showed up and, we eventually find out Mystique says Apocalypse, it was like, oh, that's Apocalypse. Oh, he does not look like anything that I thought he was going to look like from what I know of him.
Yes. And I'll dive more in a future episode because he is my absolute favorite X-Men villain and very well maybe my favorite Marvel villain of all time. All time. So, real quick, just a little bit of information. Apocalypse's real name is En Sabah Nur. And he was part of Egypt a long, long time ago. Like, I don't have a year on it, but a long, long time ago. And real quick, he was created by writer Louise Simonson and artist Jackson Guise. His first appearance was in X Factor number 5, and that was in May 1986. In this series, he's voiced by John Colicos, who was has 122 credits to his IMDb.
Wow.
So I am not going to touch upon what I thought was the most impressive parts. He played the first ever Klingon in Star Trek.
Oh, wow.
And he he helped design the look. I guess because of the limited budget, they weren't really sure what the Klingons could look like, and he's
Mhm.
actually the one that came up with the idea that they should have a Genghis Khan-like appearance. So that's what gave them the
Oh.
dark hair, the leathery skin, the kind of like, warrior class look.
Hmm.
They knew they were going to be a warrior class, but he gave them the idea to base it off of Genghis Khan. He was also Count Baltar in Battlestar Galactica. Um, but very prolific career, did a lot of stuff, and he lent his voice to Apocalypse and really brings this character to life, in my opinion. And then Dr. Adler is revealed to not really be Dr. Adler, but in actuality is Jennifer Lawrence. Uh,
Yep.
yeah. What did you think of this reveal?
I didn't honestly, I had no idea. I didn't see it coming. Like I was like, "Oh crap, this isn't no Rogue. No, you're going into some bad people here. This isn't a good thing." It was a cool reveal. I'm used to Mystique not looking like that. Like I'm used to the
Clothed?
yeah, actually, not even joking. I think both Jennifer Lawrence and what was it Rebecca Romaine Stamos,
Remains almost. Yeah.
their mystiques were just blue, just blue nothing, and Mystique looks super cool in this. By the way, like I love the blue.
I do love this costume.
And that like just that really punchy red hair with the white gown.
Yeah.
It looks super cool.
Yeah, and the way she has those skulls along her belt line, I think
Hmm.
is just a really cool. Just that's the one. Otherwise, it's a girl with it's a woman with a dress and white boots. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But those little skulls just give you the hint of death and danger, and so it makes her so cool. I think that makes her really pop.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's not actually Jennifer Lawrence. It is Mystique, aka Raven Darkholme.
Yeah.
That's her real name, Raven Darkholme, and I
Really?
think that is one of the coolest names ever in all of literature. Raven Darkholme. It's just imagery perfect, and the fact that she's a villain makes it great. She was solely created by Dave Cockrum. Chris Claremont saw Dave Cockrum's design. He's the one that gave her the name Mystique,
Hmm.
and with Cockrum's approval, had her appear in Miss Marvel number 16, and that was in May
Really?
1978.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
But her first true appearance as Mystique, because remember, she's a shapeshifter, was in Miss Marvel number 18, and that was in June 1978. And in this episode and in the series, she is voiced by Randall Carpenter. And Randall Carpenter, her biggest claim to fame, other than Mystique, is that she was in the movie Cannibal Girls, which was directed by Ivan Reitman,
Oh. Okay,
and
cool.
also starred Harold Ramis.
Really?
Or no, I'm sorry, not Harold Ramis, Eugene Levy. I'm sorry,
Really?
I was Ghostbuster braining. Yeah, Eugene Levy was in Cannibal Girls, and it was directed by Ivan Reitman. So
Nice.
yeah, but after this intrusion by Rogue, Mystique and Apocalypse decide that they can use Rogue for her powers,
Hmm.
and yeah, so we cut to Rogue, who has to now wait out an hour to be cured, and she's reflecting. And I know you're not a fan of big exposition dumps, so what did you think of this reveal of Rogue's character?
And this is where we, kind of flash back to a younger Rogue, right? I
Her and Cody.
Yeah, I like stuff like that where I might sound hypocritical at this, right now, but I hate it when characters just explain why they're doing something, but with they're thinking
Yeah,
back on, where their life has gone, and in this case, just seeing a young Rogue hurt someone that she has feelings for, and just
yeah,
again, it cements the struggle she's currently having with why she is here to begin with. I really like that kind of storytelling. It's just literally if I am standing in front of the camera and I'm telling you why I am doing what I'm about to do, or why I am doing this because of my past. Like that stuff I don't like. I just can't. I
yeah.
don't like it.
Well, and especially in a visual medium where you don't have
Hmm.
to explain everything, you show
Yeah.
things.
You
So
need your audience, you have to give your audience that they're smart enough to understand what's going on. You don't always have to explain. I'm going to get hate for this, but like in certain Christopher Nolan films,
yes, yes,
he likes to exposition dump his characters a lot. So we're smarter than that. We don't have to be explained everything. And that's what I liked about this one, because this explain without having us to, we were smart enough to infer what was happening and why she was, why she's feeling the way she is and why she's here because of that.
Yeah, 100%. And then real quick to touch upon this, Rogue is voiced by Lenore Zahn, is the actress who voiced her. She's Canadian, and she was also a former politician. She served as a member of parliament.
No way.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's a cool career. That is a U-turn of a career for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. She's done TV. She's done movies. She's done voice acting for animated shows, series. Some of the highlights: Mobile Suit Gundam and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the one that came out in 2006, not the original.
Oh, cool.
1980s one. And she was also in an episode of Law and Order. So an established film and TV career, and on top of that, she was a member of Parliament.
Wow.
So, yeah. So impressive person for sure. And let's see. All right. So Rogue reflects, and then Pyro, after abandoning his friend, leaving him for dead, finally decides to come back to the exact spot that Avalanche took a plunge in. So, I imagine they had to walk to Dr. Adler's lab, then he had to walk back. So maybe 30 minutes to an hour has passed by. I don't know how big Muir Island is, but it's very feasible that he left his friend in those choppy waters for up to an hour.
Yeah.
And he just comes back and is finally like, Avalanche!
Very dumb.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to stay in salt water very long either, because you can get dehydrated.
Remember, Avalanche's first action was to check on his good buddy Pyro. Pyro's 20th action was to check back on his friend.
We can see where their ideals lie.
Yeah,
pretty easily
Avalanche
here.
Good friend.
Yeah.
Pyro, not so much. And Pyro, for his troubles, does not find Avalanche, but instead runs into that mysterious mutant known only as Cable, who does not like being called darling.
Yeah.
Because Cable's looking for Dr. Adler. Pyro says, of course you are, shoots a fire blast at him. And Cable dodges it and shoots Pyro. But after that, he doesn't say, hey, don't shoot fire at me. He says, don't call me darling. So, that's what really got under Cable's skin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Avalanche is there to save the day, or for Pyro's sake. It pulls him out and delivers a very curious line. What did you do? Fall in?
No, Avalanche. I did not fall in.
I tried to write jokes about what other possibilities could have happened to Pyro, sarcastically, no, and I couldn't think of anything else other than, yes, he fell in. So after giving him credit for clever dialogue earlier in this episode, that one just stood out to me. It couldn't let it slide. But these two goons are quick on the feet because they realize a money opportunity in kidnapping Dr. Adler, because now there's the second person that seems to be looking for him.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're not total dum-dums. They got a little plan there. Rogue's now ready for her treatment, and she's lying down on the table, which, red flag alert, they strapped your hands down with metal cuffs.
Clamps, yeah.
Yeah, isn't that alarming? You don't really know anything about this procedure. You're going in blind, and they're physically restraining you.
Yeah.
I'd be concerned. But Rogue is in such a hurry to have that human connection again that she doesn't care. Unfortunately for her, fortunately for her, actually, it turns out, Pyro and Avalanche crash the party.
Mm-hmm.
They subdue Rogue and use the worst sack or bag I've ever seen in my life to bag the Doctor. Did you notice this?
It's a very holy bag. I did notice.
It's got
I did notice
holes in
that. Yeah, it was kind of weird. Why is there a bunch of holes in this knapsack? Maybe, I don't know. I did notice that though. That should be pretty easy to kind of just rip a bigger hole into one of those tiny holes.
And why use it at all? It's nighttime, and you're not in a public area.
Hey, it's that 90s writing, man.
Yeah, we only have a 30-minute time slot. But I noticed as they put it over Dr. Adler, it looked like a bacteria or like a giant amoeba.
Mm-hmm.
I was so distracted by it. But anyway, Pyro and Avalanche discover that they've been duped. It's actually Mystique under there, who's not happy that they've
Yeah.
interfered with their plans. Rogue appears to re-engage with them, and Dr. Adler starts running away, but runs into Cable.
Yep.
Yeah, what do you think about all this action that's going on in this episode?
I really, it was really cool, but at the same time, we have Pyro and Avalanche and Adler, Mystique, switching back and forth between Mystique and Adler, between them and between Rogue and Cable.
Yeah. And Xavier and Mctaggart.
And then all of that happening. And then what I didn't necessarily like is we first see Rogue flying above them, right? And then we see quick shot of Pyro, Avalanche, and Mystique Adler, and then Adler being Adler again. It just, the timing didn't feel quite right, where I was like, oh, Rogue totally could have seen right there that this isn't this isn't who she thinks it is.
Yeah,
but otherwise, I thought it was great. I did find it kind of weird that Pyro was able to throw a rock at Cable to disarm him. Like,
yeah.
We just
Rogue
was a Rogue. Okay, yeah, it was Rogue. See, this mercenary that is a badass, who we just saw at the very beginning of this episode, be a badass, get disarmed by there's a rock at you.
It is Rogue throwing it though, and she's got super strength.
That is true. I didn't take that into account. She is very strong, but I feel like Cable being
they could have animated it differently.
They could have done something a little bit better.
They didn't emphasize when it hits the gun.
It just
seems like the rock taps it and he drops it. Yeah, I noticed that too. I had an issue with it, but I was like, it's Rogue. Like maybe she threw it harder than we think. I mean, I wouldn't like to have a rock thrown at me by Rogue. That's for sure. Professor X and Moira appear in their pajamas because they heard a crash and they discover that Adler has been kidnapped. And then, amazing timing, the X-Men
show up,
arrive on the scene
on the Blackbird. Just whoop! Here we are.
Yes, yeah. And then now they're all going to go try to find Rogue and help her out. But Pyro, I like this little detail because Pyro, after discovering that Mystique is secretly Dr. Adler and there's no cure, that they're using this to trap mutants, it's a trap. He's trying to warn Rogue. So this is what I like about these goons that are like, they're bad guys, they're goons, but they're not terrible people because they're in it for themselves. They're trying to get money because remember they said earlier that they're going to go broke. So they're kind of just hired gun type people. They're just trying to survive. And he has this opportunity to try and he has this opportunity to try and warn Rogue. That's a tongue twister. And she doesn't listen. Instead, she hurls him into his friend.
Yeah, it's kind of a dick move, Rogue.
Yeah. And resumes her search for Dr. Adler. And Cable is ready to execute Adler, which I love. He's like, these collars that you've invented, they depower mutants, and you're too dangerous to let live.
Yeah.
So even though you haven't done anything directly to me, here's my issue with you, and this is why you need to die. So without it being a total exposition dump, because he's talking to a character, it explains why he's got to do what he's got to do. Rogue interferes. Cable hits her with the plasma grenade, and I love this little detail. He spits the grenade pin onto Dr. Adler's head. Because Dr. Adler's on his knees, and after he took the pin off with his teeth, throws the plasma grenade at Rogue, hits her with it, direct hit, just spits it recklessly on Dr. Adler's head. Just the disrespect.
No joke.
Great.
Yeah.
I just love little details like that because they bring these characters to life. Mystique then reveals herself to Cable just in time for the Blackbird to cinematically appear, and the wind is blowing them. I love all of this story, man. It's great. Then the X-Men get into it. Cyclops knocks Cable off the cliff, but an exploding rock sends Jean Grey flying over the edge.
Yep.
And who comes to the rescue?
One and only Rogue. She decides she saves Jean Grey, even though we've seen that Jean Grey can fly-ish, right? Have we seen that yet?
She does have telekinesis as part of her abilities, and she could
See, she could. So,
technically levitate herself. Yeah.
but I mean, that didn't deter from this, like, which was essentially a really good closure for Rogue, I think. So I think it was a
Yeah.
necessary requirement for this. Most times I don't think I would be as chillax about it as I am with this one. But for this,
Yeah.
like, it really worked, and it really showed what I think, albeit a little bit quick, it showed where Rogue, decided that what she needs uh, overall and how she wants to go about
Yes.
it.
I totally agree with you because at first I was bothered by this seemingly unmotivated change of heart.
Mm-hmm.
But she saves Jean Grey. She brings her back to the cliff, and Cyclops says to her, "Thank you, Rogue. You have no idea how much this means to me."
Yeah.
And Rogue is in tears because in that moment she realizes, without these powers, I couldn't have saved the day.
Oh.
Like I can do things to save people and rescue their people's loved ones, and that means I have to
Ooh.
make the selfless sacrifice and change my mind about
See,
this cure.
I didn't read it that way. I read it as a sad crying. Like, she decided she doesn't want to be, go through this treatment, but at the same time, she's putting that burden on herself willfully now. So it was, to me, I read it, or I, interpreted it as she understands what she has to do. She isn't doing it because she wants to do it, though.
Yeah.
Like,
No, that's not totally wrong because it's like the first time she got powers, she didn't have a choice. They
mm-hmm.
were just bestowed upon her. They changed her life. Now she has the opportunity because she still doesn't know that Dr. Adler's Mystique.
Yeah.
She's the only one that's oblivious, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. Because when the X-Men flew up in the Blackbird, they saw Cable holding Mystique. She's in Mystique form at that time. So Rogue, I guess now she has in her mind the option to get rid of her powers, but chooses to be a mutant
Yeah.
this time because without those powers, she couldn't have saved Jean.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing how relieved Cyclops is that his loved one is safe
Okay.
made Rogue realize that
Yeah.
I might not be able to have a love in the way that I want to, but I can save other people
Mm-hmm.
and maintain their stuff. And that's why I think she's crying there because she realizes I've got to make the sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, and then I love it because she's crying, and then now she's helping Dr. Adler repair his machinery, but she's immediately upbeat again, and she's
Yeah.
changing her. She tells him, she's changed her mind. She doesn't want to do this, and he's kind of shocked. 'Cause he's like, "But you wanted this."
Yeah,
She kind of mentions
you
like,
can kind of feel like Mystique is trying to push her to get back.
yeah,
Like, no, you want to get rid of this, or you're going to be burdened with this forever. I like that tiny detail
yeah,
from Adler. Like, even though we know it's
yeah.
Mystique.
But without revealing their hand, like trying to be persuasive
Exactly.
while
Yeah,
trying to give
yeah.
everything up. Yeah, again, nuance in the storytelling. But yeah, she says, my powers are make me who I am, and that seals it for me as far as her realizing like this is who I am. So I'm tired of thinking I could be somebody else or wanting to be somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And Rogue flies off, and she runs into
Oh, such a cool costume for Angel, dude. I love
yes,
this costume. It was so cool.
yes,
I love the colors. I just love what Angel is. Again, my only knowledge of Angel is Ben Foster from X3. But man, he looks so cool in this cartoon so far, and even
yeah,
from what we've barely seen of him.
yeah. I 100% absolutely love the red costume on Angel.
Mm-hmm.
I always have loved it in the comics. It is so striking to see it in the animated
Yeah.
series. Like it just, I want to see more of it. It's so cool. So she runs into him. He runs into her. She flies off. He decides to talk to Adler and let him know that he's in on things, or that he's down for the treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then Mystique is so excited. She can't wait to tell her what she calls her master, and to have her excitement spoiled because Apocalypse already knows everything.
Yeah. And that's how it ends.
Knows everything. Yeah, it's because he knows everything that he has to destroy everything. And yeah, and that brings our episode to a close. And it's a two-parter episode, or well, not a two-parter. We'll resume things in the next episode. Obviously, the storyline doesn't stop there, but What are your final thoughts on the episode?
Yeah, man. Like as I mentioned in the beginning, I really really dug this episode. I feel like the writers are hitting their stride now. Not only with just
Yeah,
the maturity of what they're trying to get across to us on this as a viewers end, but just in their storytelling in general, how they're being, as you mentioned a few times, a little bit more nuanced with what's going on. It's like it is it is getting so good. I can't wait to see where this leads from
yeah,
here. Oh man, I'm excited.
yeah. I totally agree. I just my note that I said was this is the episode Captive Hearts wishes it were, because there's multiple storylines happening. You've got Cable storyline, you've got Pyro and Avalanche's storyline, you've got Rogue storyline,
Hmm.
you've got Xavier and Moira's storyline, and all of these storylines, instead of distracting from each other, are all pulling in the same direction.
Yeah,
And every character's motivations are clearly defined.
yeah,
Rogue wants human connection. Pyro and Avalanche need to find a way to get money, otherwise they're going to starve.
hmm,
Um, Xavier and Moira, he's investigating on this claim. He needs to dig in on this mutant reversal and stop it. And then the X-Men that show up in the Blackbird are there to make sure that Rogue's not in trouble. So
yeah,
everybody's motivations are clearly defined. The storylines all work really well together, both in this episode and in terms of moving the entire season forward.
yeah.
So
Exactly.
I,
So
I
good.
dug it, man. Yeah. Well, that covers it, everybody. We appreciate y'all for sticking through it if you made it this part of the episode. To everybody watching, we always appreciate your support. But if you could, leave a like and a comment. Give a subscribe if you haven't already. And otherwise, we'll see you next week. Same X time, same X channel. See you, y'all.
Laters.